I should have known the night would end badly when I caught myself rolling my eyes at the handmade birthday banner hanging crooked in Miriam's dining room. But honestly, who still makes decorations from construction paper at 61? I was already 3 glasses of wine deep, feeling that familiar buzz that made everything seem either hilarious or tragic, and tonight, everything about the Price family felt like a comedy show I couldn't turn off. "Calantha, honey, could you help me bring out the cake?" Miriam called from the kitchen, her voice carrying that forced sweetness she always used around me. I knew she didn't actually want my help. She just wanted to get me away from the gift table before I made any more comments about the wrapping paper that looked like it came from a dollar store clearance bin. "Sure thing," I called back, taking another generous sip of the cheap Chardonnay they'd bought for the occasion. Everything about this family screamed budget-conscious to the point of embarrassment. Adrian made decent money as an accountant, and I worked full-time as an admin assistant. We weren't rich, but we weren't poor either. Yet here we were, celebrating his mother's birthday, with grocery store wine and a cake that was clearly homemade, not even from a decent bakery. I glanced over at my husband, who was sitting quietly in the corner, with our 7-year-old daughter Isa, helping her color in a birthday card she'd made at school. His dark hair was starting to thin at the crown, something I'd been noticing more lately, and he had that serious expression he always wore at family gatherings. Adrian never seemed to enjoy these events, but he never complained either. He just endured them with the same quiet resignation he brought to most things in our marriage. "Mom, look what Grandma gave me." Isa bounced over with a small wrapped package, her eyes bright with excitement. At 7, she still believed that any gift was magical, regardless of how much it cost or where it came from. I watched her carefully unwrap what turned out to be a hand-knitted scarf in a garish shade of purple. The stitches were uneven, clearly the work of someone who'd learned to knit from YouTube videos rather than proper instruction. Isa held it up like it was made of gold thread. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," I said, trying to keep the sarcasm out of my voice. "Very colorful." "Grandma made it herself," Isa announced proudly. She said it took her 3 weeks because she kept making mistakes and having to start over. 3 weeks to make a crooked scarf. I bit back the comment that was forming and took another drink instead. The wine was starting to make my cheeks warm and my tongue loose, which was never a good combination at family events. Miriam emerged from the kitchen carrying a chocolate cake with exactly 61 candles crammed onto the surface. The frosting was slightly lopsided, and I could see fingerprints in the chocolate where she'd tried to smooth out imperfections. My own mother would have died before serving a cake that looked so amateur, but Miriam seemed genuinely proud of her creation. "Make a wish, Mom," called out Adrian's younger sister Rebecca, who was 28 and still lived at home because she was saving money for graduate school. She'd been saving for 3 years now, as far as I could tell. We all gathered around the dining room table, which was covered with a tablecloth that had seen better days. The whole scene felt like something out of a Norman Rockwell painting, if Norman Rockwell had painted families who shopped exclusively at thrift stores and garage sales. Miriam closed her eyes and made her wish, then blew out the candles while everyone clapped. I clapped too, but I was watching the pile of gifts on the side table, wrapped in what looked like newspaper comics and brown paper bags. These people really had no sense of presentation. "Present time," Rebecca announced, clapping her hands together like she was still Isa's age. I settled back in my chair with my wine glass, ready to be entertained by whatever collection of homemade crafts and bargain bin finds they'd assembled. The first few gifts were exactly what I'd expected. A hand-painted ceramic mug from Rebecca that was clearly a pottery class project, a book of crossword puzzles from Adrian's uncle, and a small potted plant from the neighbors. "This one's from Adrian and Calantha," Miriam said, picking up the gift we'd brought. I'd spent $40 on a nice scented candle set from Bath & Body Works, nothing too expensive, but at least it was from an actual store and came in proper packaging. Miriam unwrapped it carefully, folding the wrapping paper to save for later use. "Oh, this is lovely," she said, holding up the candles. "Thank you both." "I picked the scent," I said, even though Adrian had actually been the one to suggest the gift. "It's called Fresh Spring Morning. I thought it would be perfect for your bedroom." "Very thoughtful," Miriam replied, though her tone suggested she was already mentally calculating how long she'd have to burn them before she could regift them to someone else. The next gift came from Rebecca, and I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing out loud. It was clearly a photo album, but not the kind you buy from a store. This was the kind where someone had taken the time to print out family photos at home and arrange them in a 3-ring binder with decorative paper and handwritten captions. "Oh, honey," Miriam breathed, opening the cover. "This is beautiful." I leaned forward to get a better look, the wine making me bolder than usual. The photos were arranged chronologically, starting with old black and white pictures of Miriam as a young woman, then progressing through her marriage, the birth of her children, and various family milestones. Each page had little decorative elements: stickers, colored borders, handwritten notes in Rebecca's careful script. "Look at this one," Rebecca said, pointing to a photo of Adrian's college graduation. "I found it in Mom's old shoebox and thought it would be perfect for the album." I couldn't help myself. A small laugh escaped before I could stop it. "Something funny?" Adrian asked quietly, his voice carrying a warning I chose to ignore. No, I said, waving my hand dismissively. "It's just, this is so sweet. So much work for—" I gestured vaguely at the album, trying to find words that wouldn't sound too harsh. "I mean, you can get professional photo books made online now, for like $20. The room got quiet, in that particular way that happens when someone says something that crosses an invisible line. Rebecca's face flushed red, and she looked down at her hands. "I wanted to make it personal," she said softly. "I thought Mum would like having something handmade." "Oh, I do love it," Miriam said quickly, shooting me a look that could have frozen fire. "It's perfect, sweetheart, much better than anything store-bought." I took another drink of wine, feeling the familiar defensiveness that always came when I felt like I was being ganged up on. "I wasn't criticizing," I said. "I just think it's funny how much effort people put into things when there are easier ways to do them." "Calantha," Adrian said, his voice low and tight. "What? I'm not allowed to have an opinion." The wine was definitely talking now, making my voice louder than it needed to be. "I think it's sweet, really. Very rustic." Issa looked confused, glancing back and forth between the adults like she was trying to understand why the mood had suddenly shifted. Rebecca was still staring at her hands, and Miriam had closed the photo album with a decisive snap. "Maybe we should move on to the next gift," Miriam said, her voice carefully controlled. But I was on a roll now, the wine and my own insecurity combining into a toxic mix that made me want to prove I was somehow above all this homemade sentimentality. "Can I see it again?" I asked, reaching for the album before anyone could stop me. "I want to look at the pictures." Miriam hesitated, then handed it over reluctantly. I opened it randomly to a page in the middle, where Rebecca had arranged photos from Adrian's and my wedding 5 years ago. She'd written little captions under each picture. Adrian and Calantha's special day, so happy together, the beginning of their beautiful life. I flipped to the next page and found photos of Issa as a baby, with more handwritten notes. "Our precious granddaughter, Adrian the proud daddy, growing up so fast." The next page had more recent photos, family barbecues, Christmas mornings, random moments that someone had bothered to capture and preserve. And then I found the page that would haunt me forever. It was a collection of photos from the past year, arranged around a central image of Adrian and me at last year's family reunion. We were smiling, his arm around my waist, both of us looking genuinely happy. But it was the handwritten note beneath the photo that made my wine-soaked brain completely short-circuit. In Rebecca's careful script, she'd written, "So proud of my big brother for building such a stable, loving life with a woman he truly loves. Here's to many more years of happiness together." The words swam in front of my eyes as the wine hit me full force. A woman he truly loves. Such a stable, loving life. The earnestness of it, the complete sincerity, struck me as absolutely hilarious in that moment. Here was Rebecca, living in her mother's basement at 28, writing love poetry about my marriage in a homemade photo album, like we were some kind of fairy tale couple. I started laughing, not a polite chuckle or a small giggle, but real, genuine laughter that bubbled up from my chest and filled the quiet dining room. I laughed at the careful handwriting, at the heartfelt sentiment, at the whole ridiculous scene of grown adults getting emotional over a scrapbook project. "What's so funny?" Rebecca asked, her voice small and hurt. I tried to stop laughing, but every time I looked at the page, another wave of giggles overtook me. "It's just," I gasped between laughs, "this is so serious, like you're writing our biography or something." "Calantha, stop," Adrian said, but his voice sounded far away. "A woman he truly loves," I read aloud, my voice dripping with amusement. "It's like a Hallmark card. Did you really spend 3 weeks writing captions like this?" That's when I saw Rebecca reach for the album, trying to take it back from me. Her face was bright red now, and there were tears forming in her eyes. "Give it back," she said quietly. "Oh, come on," I said, holding the album away from her. "Don't be so sensitive. I'm not trying to be mean. It's just funny how seriously you take everything." The breaking moment came when Adrian's little sister quietly pulled the gift bag back, like she wanted to hide it from me. I was still laughing, still performing for attention, until I saw what I was actually mocking. A handmade photo album with printed pictures and short notes under each one, like a small family museum. One page had a message from his mom about how proud she was of him for building a stable life with a woman he loves. I flipped that page while tipsy, and the room got silent. His mom didn't yell. She just reached over and closed the album with both hands, like she was closing a door I didn't deserve to reopen. The silence that followed was deafening. Issa was staring at me with wide, confused eyes. Adrian had gone completely pale, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles working. Rebecca was crying now, not bothering to hide the tears that were streaming down her cheeks. And Miriam just sat there holding the closed album against her chest, like she was protecting it from me. "I think," she said finally, her voice deadly quiet, "that it might be time for you to go home, Calantha." The wine buzz evaporated instantly, leaving me feeling cold and exposed. "I was just joking around," I said weakly. "I didn't mean anything by it." "Yes," Miriam said, standing up from the table. "You did." Adrian was already gathering up Issa's things, avoiding my eyes. "Come on, sweetheart," he said to our daughter. "Let's go home." As we walked to the car in silence, I told myself that they were all overreacting. So what if I'd had a little fun at their expense? They were being too sensitive, taking everything too seriously. It wasn't my fault they couldn't take a joke, but as Adrian drove us home without saying a single word, I couldn't shake the image of Miriam closing that album, protecting it from me like I was some kind of threat. Maybe I was. The drive home from Miriam's house felt like it lasted hours, even though it was only 15 minutes through our suburban neighborhood. Adrian kept his eyes fixed on the road, his hands gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles. Issa had fallen asleep in her car seat, exhausted from the emotional tension she couldn't quite understand, but had definitely absorbed. I stared out the passenger window, watching the familiar houses blur past, and felt that familiar cocktail of defensiveness and guilt churning in my stomach. The wine was wearing off, leaving me with a headache and the uncomfortable realization that maybe I'd gone too far tonight. But every time I thought about apologizing, I remembered the way they'd all looked at me, like I was some kind of monster for laughing at a homemade photo album. "Are you going to say anything?" I finally asked as we pulled into our driveway. Adrian turned off the engine and sat in silence for a moment before responding. "What would you like me to say, Calantha?" "I don't know. maybe that your family is being a little dramatic. I made one joke about a scrapbook and suddenly I'm the villain." He turned to look at me then, and I was surprised by the exhaustion in his eyes. "You made my sister cry at my mother's birthday party." "She's 28 years old. If she can't handle a little teasing, maybe that's her problem." Adrian closed his eyes and rubbed his temples. "Just, let's get Issa inside and put her to bed. We can talk about this later." But we didn't talk about it later. After we got Issa settled in her room, Adrian disappeared into his home office and closed the door. I could hear him on the phone, probably calling his mother to apologize for my behavior. The thought made my chest tight with anger and embarrassment. I poured myself a glass of wine from the bottle we kept in the kitchen and sat on the couch, scrolling through social media to distract myself from the uncomfortable silence in the house. That's when I saw the text from my sister Sabine. "Girls' night at Pulse tonight. You in?" Pulse was the trendy downtown club that had opened 6 months ago, the kind of place with expensive cocktails and a dance floor that was always packed on Saturday nights. I'd been there a few times with Sabine and her friends, and it was exactly the kind of environment where I felt like myself again, confident, attractive, fun. Not like the uptight, judgmental person Adrian's family made me feel like. I looked toward the closed office door and made a decision. "Absolutely," I texted back. "I need to get out of this house." An hour later, I was standing in front of my bedroom mirror, applying red lipstick and adjusting the neckline of the black dress I'd bought last month, but hadn't had an occasion to wear yet. It was shorter and tighter than anything I usually wore to family events. But tonight, I wanted to feel powerful and desirable. I wanted to remember who I was before I became just another suburban wife and mother. Adrian emerged from his office as I was grabbing my purse and keys. "Where are you going?" he asked, taking in my outfit with raised eyebrows. "Out with Sabine," I said, not quite meeting his eyes. "I need some air after tonight." "Calantha, we should talk about what happened." "What's to talk about? Your family doesn't like me, you're mad at me, and I'm tired of feeling like the bad guy for having a personality." I headed toward the front door, then turned back. "Don't wait up." The drive downtown gave me time to shake off the lingering guilt from the birthday party. By the time I met Sabine and her friends at Pulse, I was ready to have fun and forget about the Price family's hurt feelings. The club was exactly what I needed. Loud music, dim lighting, and enough people that I could disappear into the crowd and become someone else for a few hours. Sabine had brought her usual crew, Jessica from her yoga class, Tiffany from work, and a few other women I'd met before but didn't know well. They were all single or divorced, living the kind of life that I sometimes envied when I was stuck at home with Issa or sitting through another boring dinner with Adrian. "You look amazing," Sabine shouted over the music, handing me a Cosmopolitan that was bright pink and tasted like pure alcohol. "I love this dress." "Thanks. I figured if I'm going to be the family villain, I might as well look the part." We found a spot near the bar where we could see the dance floor, and I filled them in on the disaster at Miriam's birthday party. By the time I got to the part about the photo album, they were all laughing and shaking their heads. "Oh my God, they sound exhausting," Jessica said. "Who makes scrapbooks anymore?" "Right. It's like they're living in 1995, I agreed, feeling validated by their reactions. "And then they act like I committed a crime for laughing about it." "Families are the worst," Tiffany added. "My ex-husband's family was the same way. Everything had to be so serious and meaningful. God forbid you have a sense of humor." The alcohol and the supportive audience were exactly what I needed to restore my confidence. These women understood me in a way that Adrian's family never would. They appreciated my wit and my refusal to pretend that mediocrity was somehow noble. After my second Cosmopolitan, I was feeling loose and confident enough to hit the dance floor. The music was loud and hypnotic, and I lost myself in the rhythm, feeling more like myself than I had in months. This was who I really was, not the uptight suburban mom who had to pretend to be impressed by hand-knitted scarves and homemade birthday cakes. That's when I saw Jesse Lynn. I knew Jesse from the gym where I'd been taking fitness classes for the past year. He was one of the personal trainers, and we'd flirted casually during my workouts. Nothing serious, just the kind of harmless banter that made me feel attractive and desirable. He was 34, single as far as I knew, with the kind of muscular build that came from spending most of his life in gyms. "Calantha," he called out when he spotted me on the dance floor. "Fancy seeing you here." He made his way through the crowd, and I felt a thrill of excitement as he approached. Jesse represented everything that my marriage to Adrian wasn't: spontaneous, exciting, unpredictable. He was the kind of man who would never spend Saturday night making photo albums or getting emotional about handmade gifts. "Hey, stranger," I said, having to stand close to him to be heard over the music. "I didn't know you came here." "First time," he said, his eyes appreciating my dress in a way that Adrian's hadn't. "You look incredible." We started dancing together, and I felt that familiar rush of attraction and validation that had been missing from my life lately. Jesse was a good dancer, confident and physical, in a way that made me feel feminine and desirable. When he put his hands on my waist to guide me through a turn, I didn't pull away. The music was loud enough that we had to lean in close to talk, and I found myself telling him about the birthday party disaster, laughing as I described the homemade gifts and my in-laws' dramatic reactions. "Sounds like they need to lighten up," he said, his breath warm against my ear. "Life's too short to take everything so seriously." "Exactly," I said, feeling understood in a way I hadn't all evening. "That's what I keep trying to tell my husband, but he's just like his family. Everything has to be so meaningful and deep." Jesse spun me around again, and I caught a glimpse of Sabine and her friends watching from the bar. They were smiling and giving me thumbs up, clearly enjoying the show. The attention felt intoxicating, and I found myself dancing closer to Jesse, letting the music and the alcohol wash away my inhibitions. "Your husband's an idiot if he doesn't appreciate what he has," Jesse said, his hand settling on my hips as we moved to the slower song that had just started. I should have stepped back then. I should have remembered that I was married, that I had a daughter at home, that this was exactly the kind of behavior that would destroy everything I'd built with Adrian. But the wine from dinner and the cosmopolitans from the bar had lowered my defenses, and Jesse's attention felt like exactly what I needed after being made to feel like a villain all evening. "He doesn't," I said, looking up into Jesse's dark eyes. "He doesn't appreciate anything about me." We kept dancing, and I let myself get lost in the fantasy of being single and free, of being the kind of woman who could attract a man like Jesse. When he leaned down to whisper something in my ear, I didn't pull away. When his hands moved lower on my back, I pressed closer instead of stepping back. I was vaguely aware of phones flashing around us. Everyone documented everything at clubs like this, but I was too caught up in the moment to care. Let people take pictures. Let them see that Calantha Dorsey was more than just a suburban housewife who had to pretend to be impressed by craft projects. The song ended, and Jesse suggested we get some air on the club's rooftop terrace. I should have said no. I should have gone back to Sabine and her friends, or better yet, gone home to my husband and daughter. But the night felt magical, like I was finally living the life I was supposed to have instead of the one I'd settled for. We found a quiet corner of the terrace, away from the other people who were smoking and talking. The city lights spread out below us, and I felt sophisticated and glamorous in a way that I never did in the suburbs. "This is nice," Jesse said, standing close enough that I could smell his cologne. "Much better than the gym." "Much better than birthday parties with homemade gifts," I agreed, laughing at the memory. "You're too good for all that suburban family drama," he said, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear. "You deserve someone who appreciates your spirit." The gesture was intimate and romantic, and I felt my resolve crumbling. When he leaned in to kiss me, I didn't stop him. The kiss was everything that was missing from my marriage. Passionate, urgent, exciting. For a moment, I forgot about Adrian and Issa and the birthday party disaster. I forgot about everything except the feeling of being desired and appreciated. When we finally broke apart, I was breathless and guilty and exhilarated all at once. "I should go," I said, but I didn't move away from him. "Should you?" he asked, his hand still on my waist. Before I could answer, I heard Sabine's voice calling my name from across the terrace. "Calantha, there you are." I stepped back from Jessie quickly, my heart pounding with adrenaline and guilt. Sabine approached with a knowing smile, clearly having seen more than I would have liked. "Ready to head out?" she asked, but her eyes were dancing with excitement. "This has been quite a night." The drive home was a blur of Sabine's excited chatter about what she'd witnessed, my own conflicted emotions, and the growing realization that I'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. By the time I got home, it was almost 2 a.m, and the house was dark and silent. I crept upstairs, expecting to find Adrian asleep, but his side of the bed was empty. I found him in the guest room, lying awake and staring at the ceiling. "Have fun?" he asked without looking at me. "It was fine," I said, suddenly aware of how I must look, disheveled, smelling like alcohol and cologne, my lipstick long gone. I'm sure it was. I wanted to say something, to explain or apologize, or at least acknowledge what had happened between us earlier. But the words wouldn't come, and eventually I went to our empty bedroom and tried to sleep. As I lay there in the dark, I told myself that nothing really happened. A dance and a kiss didn't mean anything. It was just harmless fun, a way to blow off steam after a difficult evening. Adrian was overreacting about the birthday party, and I deserved to have some fun after being made to feel like a villain. But even as I rationalized it to myself, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had fundamentally shifted. The kiss with Jessie had awakened something in me that I'd been trying to ignore, the feeling that I'd settled for a life that was too small, too ordinary, too safe. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I wondered if anyone had gotten a good photo of me and Jessie on that dance floor. I woke up Monday morning with a pounding headache and the kind of guilt that settles in your stomach like a stone. The house was quiet. Adrian had already left for work, and Issa was still sleeping. I had 45 minutes before I needed to get her ready for school, which gave me just enough time to shower off the remnants of Saturday night and try to convince myself that everything was going to be fine. But as I stood under the hot water, I couldn't stop thinking about that kiss with Jessie. In the harsh light of Monday morning, it felt less like a moment of liberation and more like a massive mistake. I was married, I had a daughter, I had a life that I'd worked hard to build, even if it wasn't always exciting. I was toweling off when my phone buzzed with a text from Sabine. "Hope you're feeling okay this morning. What a night." Before I could respond, another text came through, this one from Jessica. "Girl, you were on fire Saturday night." And then another from Tiffany. "That guy from the gym is hot. I don't blame you." My stomach dropped. If they were all texting me about Jessie, that meant they'd definitely seen us together, which meant other people had probably seen us too, which meant... I quickly opened Instagram and searched for posts tagged at Pulse from Saturday night. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. There, in Jessica's story from Saturday night, was a video of the dance floor. And right in the center of the frame, clearly visible despite the dim lighting, was me dancing with Jessie. The video was only 15 seconds long, but it captured everything. The way he had his hands on my waist, the way I was pressed against him, the obvious chemistry between us. My hands were shaking as I checked to see who had viewed the story. 37 people, including several names I recognized from Adrian's work and our neighborhood, including Marcus Patel, Adrian's co-worker who lived 3 streets over and had always been friendly at neighborhood barbecues. "Shit," I whispered, sinking onto the edge of the bathtub. I quickly checked my own social media to see if I'd posted anything embarrassing, and found a selfie I'd taken in the club bathroom around midnight. I was clearly drunk in the photo, my lipstick smudged and my eyes glassy, with the caption, finally feeling like myself again. The comments were already starting to pile up. "Get it, girl," from Sabine. "You look amazing," from Tiffany. "Where's Adrian?" from my co-worker Jennifer Wu, followed by a winky face emoji. That last comment made my blood run cold. Jennifer Wu was the office gossip, the kind of person who collected information about everyone's personal lives and distributed it like currency. If she was asking about Adrienne, it meant she'd already connected the dots between my night out and my marriage. I deleted the post immediately, but I knew it was too late. Screenshots were forever, and Jennifer definitely seemed like the type to take them. "Mummy," Issa's voice called from her bedroom. "I'm awake." I forced myself to put the phone down and focus on getting her ready for school. But as we went through our normal morning routine, breakfast, brushing teeth, finding her backpack, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to fall apart. The feeling got worse when I dropped Issa off at school and saw Mrs. Patterson, her second-grade teacher, watching me with a strange expression. "Good morning, Calantha," she said as Issa ran off to join her friends. "How was your weekend?" "Fine," I said quickly. "Just the usual family stuff." "That's nice," Mrs. Patterson said, but something in her tone suggested she knew more than she was letting on. "If you ever need to talk about anything, or if there are any changes at home that might affect Issa, please don't hesitate to reach out." "Changes?" I repeated. "What do you mean?" "Oh, nothing specific," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Just that children are very sensitive to tension at home, and we want to make sure Issa has all the support she needs." I drove to work with my hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to figure out how Mrs. Patterson could possibly know about Saturday night. Did she follow me on social media? Did she know someone who'd been at the club? Or was I just being paranoid? The answer became clear as soon as I walked into my office. The conversation at the front desk stopped abruptly when I appeared, and I caught Jennifer Wu quickly closing something on her computer screen. Two other co-workers, who had been chatting by the coffee machine, suddenly found urgent reasons to return to their desks. "Morning, Calantha," Jennifer said with a bright smile. "How was your weekend?" "Fine," I said, heading straight to my desk without making eye contact, but I could feel them watching me, and I could hear the whispered conversations that stopped whenever I got too close. By lunchtime, I was convinced that everyone in the office had seen the video of me dancing with Jessie. I was right. "So," Jennifer said, appearing at my desk with a cup of coffee and a concerned expression, "I hope you don't mind me asking, but are you and Adrian okay?" "Of course we're okay," I said, not looking up from my computer. "Why would you ask that?" "Well, I saw some photos from Saturday night, and you seem to be having a really good time with that guy from your gym." My blood pressure spiked. "What photos?" "Oh, just some Instagram stories. I'm sure it's nothing, but you know how people talk. I just wanted to make sure you were okay." Jennifer's voice was dripping with fake concern, and I could see the excitement in her eyes. She was loving this, loving the fact that she had gossip about someone else's marriage falling apart. "There's nothing to talk about," I said firmly. "I went dancing with my sister. That's it." "Of course," Jennifer said. "I'm sure it's all innocent, but maybe you should know that the video is making the rounds. Marcus from Adrian's office sent it to a few people, and you know how these things spread." The room started spinning. Marcus had the video, which meant people at Adrian's work had seen it, which meant Adrian probably knew about it by now. I excused myself to the bathroom and called Sabine immediately. "Please tell me you didn't post that video anywhere," I said as soon as she answered. "What video?" she asked, but I could hear the guilt in her voice. "You know what video? The one of me and Jessie dancing." "Oh, that. I might have shared Jessica's story to my own story, but it was just for like 12 hours. I took it down this morning." "Sabine, do you have any idea how many people saw that?" "Calm down, Calantha. It's not like you were doing anything that bad. You were just dancing." "I'm married. I have a daughter. I can't be seen grinding on some personal trainer at a club." "You weren't grinding," Sabine said defensively. "You were barely even touching." And honestly, maybe this is good. Maybe it will make Adrian realize what he has before he loses it. I hung up on her and spent the rest of the day hiding in my cubicle, trying to avoid the curious stares and whispered conversations of my co-workers. Every time my phone buzzed, I expected it to be Adrian calling to confront me about the video, but he didn't call. The silence was somehow worse than a confrontation would have been. When I got home that evening, Adrian was in the kitchen helping Issa with her homework. They both looked up when I walked in, and I searched Adrian's face for any sign that he'd seen the video, but his expression was unreadable. "How was work?" he asked, his tone carefully neutral. "Fine," I said. "How was yours?" "Interesting," he said. "Marcus mentioned he saw some photos of you from Saturday night." My heart stopped. "Photos?" "From the club. He said you looked like you were having fun." Issa was watching our conversation with wide eyes, clearly sensing the tension even if she didn't understand it. I forced myself to smile. "I was having fun," I said. "I went dancing with Sabine. Is that a crime?" "Of course not," Adrienne said. "I'm glad you had a good time." But something in his voice suggested that he'd seen more than just photos. Something in his voice suggested that he knew exactly what had happened on that dance floor, and possibly on the rooftop terrace too. That night, after Issa was in bed, I tried to bring up the subject of Saturday night, but Adrian just said he was tired and went to the guest room again. I lay in our empty bed, staring at the ceiling and wondering how everything had spiraled out of control so quickly. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Thought you should know this is making the rounds." Attached was a screenshot of a group chat I wasn't part of, where someone had shared the video of me and Jessie dancing. The chat was titled Neighborhood Watch and included names I recognized from our street and Issa's school. One of the messages read, "Isn't this Calantha Dorsey, the one married to the accountant?" Another, "Yikes, that's definitely not her husband." And another, "Poor Adrian, I always thought she was too much for him." I stared at the screenshot until my eyes burned, realizing that my marriage wasn't just in trouble, it was becoming public entertainment for our entire social circle. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I wondered what other evidence was out there, waiting to surface.